So guys, let's start this. First of all, Peter, thank you very much. And there's just one message to you, and you readily agreed to meet all of us. Guys, please switch off your mobile, your speakers, please. Put your speaker off. Yeah. So I think Peter Mukerjea doesn't need any introduction. All of you know it very well. Some of you have also received the book personally signed by Peter. And the book is wonderful, wonderfully written. A great reading, I would say. Very simple to read and very interesting to read, I would say. A lot about how Peter established one of the most powerful brand in India at a time when such things were totally new to India, and how he came across a lot of challenges on the way from government, from competitors, especially the Indian competitors, and being a foreign company, how he established himself. A lot is written in that book, in that journey. So before we start, I would request Peter to say a few words, and then we'll make this session more interactive so that all of you have a chance to ask questions. Some of you have shared the questions with me, I have with me, but some of you have not, so we can ask one-to-one since Peter is already here. So Peter, over to you. Thank you so much for your time once again.
Harish, thank you so much for, first of all, for such a kind of glowing introduction. I don't think I deserve that. It's just, I've been very fortunate in the fact that, I happened to be at the right time, at the right place, at a point in time when, broadcast media was flourishing and everybody was, tuning into some form of television content somewhere in the country. And we were sitting on the cusp of a wave. And, I happened to be, as I say, in the right place, right time. So for that, I'm very, very thankful to my stars and my, I'm not an astrological person, but for my good fortune in that sense. And also for, the entire team that I had working with me, because none of this is ever, a single-handed effort. I've got to tell you, it's, quite honestly, anybody who was sitting in that position would probably have done the same thing. And, I just happen to be very lucky to be there. But thank you for, having me here. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I think, I'd really looking forward to having a nice dialogue with you guys. I say dialogue intentionally, as, the dictionary sort of describes it as a conversation between two or more people. And I think, if we can keep it as a two-way conversation, then I think it'll be much more, it'll be more interesting. But if you find it's getting dull, then, tell me and we can do something else to kind of alter it. But I think it'll be better than just hearing from me. And, it's that time of the day as well when, I think people drop off to sleep. I do anyway. So I think you don't really want me to be yakking away for too long, but, chuck some questions at me and I'll be very happy to kind of answer as many of those as I possibly can, in the shortest possible way. I hope you've all had a chance to read my book. If you haven't, then please do. If you read some of it, then please finish it. I'm very happy to have written it. I hope you're equally happy to read it. And I've enjoyed that experience, and actually writing something about things that happened almost sort of 2 decades ago is actually quite difficult because I'm not the sort of person that made heaps of notes or, made kind of any kind of notings of things that happened. But so it's all really from memory, and our work style and our work life was so, I would say, unbalanced. We were working hard, we were playing hard, we were doing all kinds of things that to kind of refresh your memory some years later to see what happened some many years ago is actually quite hard. So, to try and, the only way I could do that was to write this book in a fairly conversation kind of way, so it's easy to read. And I think one of your colleagues just now who looks after, I think, your radio business, Rahul, said that he managed to finish that book in 24 hours, which is absolutely the kind of objective that I had was that, if you can finish in 24 or 36 hours, then it's, my job is done, really. I wanted to get, it shouldn't be something that's sitting around and, finding it difficult to read and it's too much of a struggle, because it's not that kind of a book, So anyway, thank you, Harish, for having me here. And I'm very happy to be part of a group of people who are running such a big media company now. The DB Corp is really extraordinary. I mean, I had always thought of it as being a huge, media conglomerate, but I had no idea that it was, the largest in the country by a long way. So I'm delighted to be here and very honored to be so. Thank you very much.
So, Peter, thank you very much once again. And you're being very modest that you are lucky and fortune, you had a fortune favored you. But I think a lot of it went to in what kind of a people you hired, So my question here is that will you hire the people basis keeping in mind your immediate team? I'm not talking of entire hierarchy, but I'm saying your immediate generals. Will you hire the team keeping your strengths and weaknesses in mind? Or will you hire the team keeping their strengths and weaknesses in mind?
Okay, well, I before I joined Star, I think two of my earlier jobs, one of them was at Ogilvy, which is a, O&M, and as we know it. And I remember when you join that agency, one of the first things they give you to read is a couple of books written by David Ogilvy. And one of those books, I can't remember the exact name, but I think it's similar title to mine, which is, Confessions of an Advertising Man. He says in there that, hire people bigger than yourself, and then you build a company of giants, right? And I always believed that whenever I had an opportunity to hire somebody, I would try and hire them, who were bigger than me. Obviously, not necessarily physically bigger, but in all aspects, mentally, in terms of, exposure, in terms of passion, and all of those attributes. So my mission in every hiring that I did was to try and hire somebody who was bigger than me and then you really do have a collection of people who are, big in terms of being able to handle big tasks and are not scared and they are gutsy people, they're daring people, they like challenges, they are passionate, far greater than qualifications. I think one of the questions you sent me, and we can touch on that later on, is qualifications more important than passion? And I think without doubt, I think passion comes far ahead. And at least in a kind of media organization or in a media business, which is so dynamic, and you're kind of faced with all kinds of issues on a day-to-day basis, there's no such thing as a textbook answer. And so therefore, if you don't have textbook answers, you really have to have people who are prepared to roll up their sleeves and get stuck in, no matter what the task, all hands on deck. So you need people who are, capable of multitasking, people who can, can really not worry about their work-life balance, because quite often, work becomes so engaging that you can't take time off and go back home. So I think in answer to your question, without laboring the point, I think without doubt, I think, people who are collectively, you build a team. And I think that's the sort of secret, if you like, in many ways. And we had different ways of handling that. Obviously we would pay people extraordinarily well. We believe that, you pay them higher than what the market rates are. And that got me into a lot of trouble sometimes. And we had to kind of skate around those issues. Trouble internally with some of my senior managers at that time. But I think we got them to understand over time that, you get what you pay for. And I think, if you can put people's sort of economic worries to one side, then you're going to get the best out of them when they're at work. Otherwise, and also then it builds a culture of high levels of integrity. I think people who are perhaps underpaid in various professions or various jobs, tend to look at other ways of supplementing their income. And that's the last thing you need, because then that bleeds the company very badly, and you build bad reputations, and corporate reputation is completely dismantled. So I think in order to avoid those kind of almost certain pitfalls, you have to kind of have certain things in place. And I also have constant battles with HR, for example. And I promise you, one of the things I learned was that, and I hope I don't get criticized by you guys for this, but one of the things I learned very early is that, whilst we didn't have an HR department, we hired really good people. And when we got an HR department, then our quality of hiring dropped. Which is ironical, because logically you would think it should improve it. But the fact is, when you end up with HR sort of sending you resumes, they tend to follow a rather textbook approach of recruitment, and it doesn't work. So, I used to have constant battles with our HR people, regularly. But then I think after a while they gave up on me, and they said, look, he's going to hire these people anyway, so there's no point doing this. Let us just deal with, other HR issues like leave and, salaries and, other paperwork kind of related stuff.
So this is a very good point you made, that as a leader, we should always hire teams smarter than us, especially in the areas that we know that we are not strong. And that's what makes a great organization, whether you are running a state or a unit or whatever. Now, I have this another question which is coming from your book only. So there are two questions basically together. One is, you written somewhere that you were never really fancied about hiring great MBAs as such, because you realize that that's not the qualification you need, and you are looking more towards passion in the people and high energy in the people. Why were you so against those MBAs?
Well, I wasn't so much against the MBAs, Harish. I think it was more to do with the fact that, the need of the hour was to have people who, were stretching themselves beyond their own expectations. So you give them tasks which they themselves did not believe that they could achieve. So, but then you motivate them, you incentivize them, you kind of build their confidence, you give them freedom. And yes, they should also know that, if they make a mistake, they're not going to get fired, right? But they have to take decisions. I always found, and later on in my career, prior to Star, of course, but I didn't do my MBA. It was in evening school, but I'll tell you something. I never used it one bit. I never used any of it. It was just it was a thing that you hang on the wall and say, I've got this certificate, and but that's it. I never actually put it to any use. And in a sense, it did me more good by having done that course, because I knew very well, that I should not hire people like that in this kind of a job, right? And had I not done that course, maybe I would have still been in awe of people who had MBAs, and I would have been saying, oh, we must have MBAs only, and have those. But I'm glad I went and did it, and I did it. And then after that, I realized, good, this is not the kind of person we need to hire. And that was a learning, and that was a kind of, if you like, a contrary learning from that MBA course. And I've said this to my some of my professors when I did an executive management program at Kellogg. We got talking about this subject, and I remember telling one of the lecturers and one of the professors that, look, this is what it is, and he completely agreed with me. He said, look, whatever it is, as long as you benefited your organization by having done that course, then that's fair enough. Some people in certain kind of jobs, you need to have an MBA. You need to have a very disciplined approach to your working, working style. It could be a very big organization with 20,000 plus employees and so on, We weren't that kind of company. We were a very small company. We were growing very fast. We were taking decisions on the fly. We were really taking calls as we were going along. We didn't have a mapped out route map to say that, look, this is how we have to work and this is how we must. And if we don't do it like this, then it's wrong. I think you get to an organization gets to a size and complexity when it grows to a certain kind of position, and then you need MBAs at that point. At the point we were at, I don't think we needed them, and therefore I didn't hire them.
That's it. So let me close this chapter of hiring as such. So one of the point that comes to one of the challenges we face in some of the states is that the frontline people. Now we have a frontline people of almost 80% is our sales force is frontline. 20% is in the leadership capacities and then 80% is frontline. What do you think is the importance of hiring a frontline people, and should the CEOs themselves engage, because that's 80% of the workforce? Should the CEOs of a state who are running a business of 100 crore, 200 crore, 300 crore, should they engage themselves in hiring such people? Because if that is the 80% of the workforce, or should they delegate this to their unit heads? Because every state, like we have a state in Rajasthan, we would have some 20 units. Instead of MP, we will have some 30 units. So should they delegate this to their unit heads, or you think the CEO must get involved, since that's the 80% of the workforce, especially the frontline team?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear what you're saying, and I'll give you an answer which may not again suit you, but I'll say it to you anyhow. I'm a great believer in the fact that if your CEOs have a clear understanding of the vision of the organization and the mission that they have to fulfill over a period of time, then I think the first thing they have to do is to hire the right people. And I go back to talking about, and I have no axe to grind with HR departments at all, but I think when it comes to frontline salespeople, it's imperative that the CEO takes out time to hire those people himself or herself, because that's where you're kind of bringing into the organization people who are your brand ambassadors. When they're going to meet clients, when they're going to meet your other business partners, those are the people that are interfacing. And if you're not in a position to take out time to do that, then everything else becomes, in a sense, bureaucratic in nature. Because you're doing a lot of other stuff, you're signing checks, you're kind of and you're looking at administrative things, which is okay, it's important, but really becomes futile if you don't have, the right people at the coalface. So I think, absolutely, I think the question that you asked is very, very relevant. And, I'm glad you have asked it, because a lot of organizations and a lot of CEOs, sadly, tend to kind of think of that as being beneath their job profile, right? They leave it to the HR person, and the HR person has to kind of handle it. They handle the resumes, and they meet them for 5 minutes at the final stages of a recruitment process. And it's literally just introducing a new potential candidate and introducing them to the CEO and vice versa. But really, they ought to be there at the very first meeting and see what is in that person's mind, in that person's bloodstream, to really understand whether that person is going to fit in with what that broader overarching mission of the company is. And so if they miss out on that opportunity, then you're going to kind of have a compromised situation all the way down the line.
So that's very nice. As you go forward, my next question to you is, because we talked of a lot of transition from an English channel to a Hindi channel. What do you think, how important was content for you in those days to become a mass brand? Do you think that remaining English would have been a very niche brand and you wanted to transit to a local language because of mass base and hence the mass revenues? Or do you think being a niche brand also you could have taken a start to this level of where it is today?
One of the words that I've talked about in my book is localization. And one of the things that happened at that time was that, we were an all English language service across all the 3 or 4 genres that we were in. There was news, which was BBC News. There was music, which was MTV, and that was purely English music or Western music, I should say. There was sport, which was all in English, commentary and presentation. And then there was Star Plus, which was all English as well. Now, we sampled, this whole concept of localization, first of all, with music. And when MTV decided that they didn't want to be part of a Hindi kind of transition, they decided to leave and parted ways with us. We started Channel V immediately, and we launched with Hindi content. And the reaction we got to that, quite honestly, was extraordinary because it gave us a really good insight and a kind of proper dipstick introduction to, local language. And there was and don't forget, we were a foreign company operating in India with our sort of regional headquarters in Hong Kong. And so there was a fair amount of resistance initially to, converting ourselves from English to Hindi. For whatever reason, I think it was, there's a lead weight that sits in organizations. They say, look, this is what we've been doing, and this is working fine, so why do we want to change it? However, I think the changeover of music from MTV to Channel V was one. When Mr. Basu arrived from Doordarshan, he brought with him a different mindset, which was, look, we have to localize. We have to do programming in Hindi. And his interest was not at the music level. It was more to do with general entertainment, which is really the big fish, right? So he was very, very instrumental in making that first big move within the organization first to buy into the fact that we must localize general entertainment. And he tried, various things because we were contractually bound with Subhash's Z channels to not do any Hindi as such. So we had to do different things which were within the framework of legality. So we could do things like dubbing, and we could do things within the 24-hour period, which was not in prime time, and all that kind of stuff. Sadly, none of that worked. But what it did do was that experimenting gave us the confidence that, look, we have to go into localizing our content. Now, when we did that, again, the first thing that happened then was we brought on board a number of shows that were running on Doordarshan at the time. Now, for whatever reason, distribution was complicated. The cable operators didn't really understand at that point why we were moving from English to Hindi. The consumer and the viewer was confused. They were saying, okay, we're watching Baywatch 1 week. Now we're watching something else. This is now in Hindi. Something was being dubbed. It looked weird. And the whole thing was changed. Having done that, there is no doubt. Look, if we had not moved from English to Hindi and we had not localized and we had not gone into, local language, there is no way that we would, or Star would have been what it is currently in the marketplace, or what it became in the marketplace.
So, Peter, as per your experience, what's the importance of content, whether it's a TV or a newspaper or now even OTT platform? What is the importance of content to a channel like TV or a newspaper, and how much the content affects the pricing of a TV channel or a newspaper?
See, I think content,
both are same. Maybe the genre may be slightly different, but
yeah.
I would still say that the contents. What's the importance of content as per your experience, and how does it play a role in as for the pricing of that channel?
Okay, let me put content into a slightly broader context. And just for the ease of our conversation, I'd put content and distribution together because both are equally important. Now, I would
Right.
assume,
Right.
we can't have one and not the other, right? So if you have great content, but it's not being distributed well enough and it's not being accessible to, homes and households and people, then you're kind of really beating yourself silly because you're not actually moving anything. So I'm taking content and distribution together as one kind of composite unit. And assuming that distribution is not a problem, then I think content is by far and away the most important aspect of a media business. Whether it is news, whether it's newspapers, whether it's magazines, whether it is television broadcast or whatever, right? And in current parlance, everything to do with OTT is all about content, right? You want to watch a show, you don't watch a channel. Now, it becomes different, I think, when you're in a news business, because news per se is news. What spin you put on it is a different thing. So that becomes, in a sense, your content plus the strength of your brand, right? Now, the strength of your brand and the content that you are putting out delivers you your capacity to put your pricing in place, because then you have, the ability to be able to, price your product in a way that, is meaningful. And I'll never forget in the newspaper business, I remember in the UK, Rupert Murdoch, once upon a time, I think took 50% off the price of his newspapers overnight. And the whole marketplace was completely was shaken up, because there he was with a...
We lost you. We lost your sound.
You lost me?
Peter, we lost your sound.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear now. Yeah.
You can hear me? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was saying, he took a huge chunk out of the price of the newspaper, and it did wonders for his distribution, did wonders for his circulation and his readership and his advertising, right? Because I think at some point he recognized that, look, I need to have really good advertising revenues in order to be able to support my
product.
Yeah, and I think that made a huge difference. So in answer to your question, Harish, I think content, number one, combined with distribution, strength of brand, I think particularly in the kind of business that you have, is hugely important, which then gives you the ability to price. And they are interconnected.
This is a related question with were you ever able to charge a premium because of content?
Yeah, very much. We were, and it was a battle. And I think this is what you have to be able to prepare to handle. There is going to be a battle with media buyers. There's no question, right? Media buyers will resist any kind of pricing shift, right? If you reduce your price, they will say, hey, why are you reducing your price? Because, are you guys not doing well? Are you struggling? Right? If you put your price up, they say, hold on, I'm not going to buy this because you're way too expensive. Right? But there were times when with some of the biggest advertisers, and we can perhaps mention them to the private group here, but Unilever or Hindustan Levers at that time, they gave us such a hard time with our, what we would call an annual deal, right? And they would negotiate and get to a point whereby it was, they'd knocked us off the pricing chart so much that it was hardly worth doing a deal with them, right? So at one point, I remember telling our sales guys, I said, listen, let's not go to Unilever and not visit them for some time. So whoever's the sales head for Unilever, please stop calling on Unilever's offices, stop calling on Group M, no Group M meetings as regards Unilever, that's it. We do not have meetings with Unilever now until we get some sense out of them. And I'll tell you what, Harish, within 3 weeks, they were back at the negotiating table and we got our pricing the way we wanted it. So if you have strength of brand, then I don't think you should, compromise your pricing on with whosoever it might be, and however big a carrot they can dangle.
Hmm. Great. That's good. So, moving on from here, I'm going from hiring to content to next thing is as a leaders, all of us are required to build a certain culture, a culture of the organization, which is very positive and very growth oriented. Now, there is something you do at the top, like you had an office in Mumbai where you are sitting. Now, Mumbai office directly under you. So, a lot of stakes of creating a culture come right under you. But the moment you move to your Delhi office, like you had a Delhi office, you had a Bangalore office, then you had a Calcutta office, whose responsibility is to build that culture? Whether it's only a top management or it's also the responsibility of the location heads who are representative and are directly controlling those locations. Who builds the culture in the organization?
You do, as in, you're the guy running the company. The people that are running those sub offices or satellite offices, if you want to call them that, or offices in metros or whatever, I think are people that you put there because they have a certain level of seniority and they have a certain understanding of the market. But the work culture that you talk about has to come from the very top, and that has to flow through. It's like it literally is a blood vessel that has to flow through. The same blood has to flow through every part of the body. It cannot change, because it's, right limb or left limb or whatever. It doesn't change its consistency, right? And so therefore, when you're hiring, go back to the question you had earlier, which is that when you're hiring people, are you there when they're being hired? Yes, you are. Your first interaction is with you, right? You say, listen, this is what I expect from you. This is what I expect you to be doing. And if you have any problems, feel free to pick up the phone and call me, right? And that, once you've got that in place, then those sub offices of yours will have the same thinking running right the way through the organization. So I don't think you'll then have a problem with continuing and passing on that work culture that you're trying to create into all your different offices in different cities, no matter whether they are small cities or large cities. The same will follow through. And if it doesn't, then you've got to blame yourself. You can't blame the guy who's running that office because you have let something down. You've kind of, broken the chain, so to speak, because that chain that has to go through has to be the one that you set in place.
So somewhere you think while the top is ready, is in agreement with this is the kind of culture we have to build. But sometimes it happens that in some locations the person is saying yes, but is only saying yes. He's not doing in spirit. You think that kind of a conflict does come up? And if that is also because of wrong hiring or wrong judgment, maybe when we were hiring, or is it because of misalignment over a period of time?
Well, it could be any of those things, actually, what you say. But I think it's, again, you've got to take it on yourself. You've got to occasionally surprise people by going and visiting those places, going and showing up there. It is hard, but that's what you're paid for, right? You have to be there. You have to kind of go. And I've taken, done sort of, I would call them surprise visits. I've gone off to a office in Calcutta when I thought something was not working out right there. I took a really early morning flight, showed up, and I sat down in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. Nobody shows up till 10 o'clock, right? So when I'm sitting there, the first guy comes in at 10, he's shocked, he's horrified, he doesn't know I'm there, right? And he's horrified to see me sitting at his desk. And he says, boss, I didn't know you were coming. You could have called me. I said, yeah, but that's the whole point. I didn't want to tell you I'm coming. So, and that, you do that once, the message gets out to everybody, right? That, look, this is what you're expecting from them. So the question of misalignment should never happen. I mean, of course it happens, but if it happens, there are very quick ways to fix it. You don't have to fire somebody. You have to, bring them on track because they think, well, boss is far away, he's not going to show up for some time, So, when you can kind of change that set of basic understanding, things will fall into place. And, you know, pick up the phone. I think this whole business of having lots of layers and you can't talk to the junior most person in the company is wrong. You know, there's a little example in my book, Harish, I don't know if you remember it, but about when Jack Kennedy went on a trip around NASA, right? And he was the president of the United States. He was walking around NASA. They were showing him around and he asked one of the guys there, so what is it you do?
Janitor.
Yeah. And he said, look, I help people get on the moon.
Correct.
Right?
I read that. Yeah.
And so I think that's what you want. You want the guy who's at the, you know, at the lowest level in your company to feel the same thing that, you know, the chief feels.
Yeah. So one question which comes to always mind is that what different you did at Star to make it most aspirational place to work for?
Well, a number of things. I'll tell you, number of things. I first to tell you, I was very fortunate. I keep saying that, but because I genuinely believe that I was very fortunate that I had spent a long time working overseas, right? And in that process, I got familiarized with a certain kind of work culture. So I was accustomed to having a very first name work culture everywhere. So everybody was, you know, Harish or Rahul or whatever, you know, and there was no Mr. And that instantly changed a number of things, right? A lot of people, young people who joined the company were not accustomed to that. They thought, you know, it'd be Mr., Sir, Ma'am, etc. No, sorry, doesn't work. Change that. Everyone is first name, right? Second, when they're being hired, they're being given all the information. They're being treated well, right? They're being treated well to the extent that they feel valued. So, you know, I'm really not getting anti-HR here, but when the guy comes in for an interview, for his first interview, or she comes into you know, they must not be kept waiting for 5 minutes, right? We've got 11:30 time to meet. There should be somebody with them at 11:30 saying, look, hi, welcome, come on in, sit down. Here's something to read. Here's an envelope. Please read this while you're going to go into your meeting with so-and-so. There's a couple of pages you might want to flick through, which is our company brochure or something, right? So they have something, the minute that happens, they feel that, they have some respect. Not that they're sitting there waiting for half an hour and, you know, their meeting hasn't started, nobody's quite sure what's going on and stuff like that. So I think it starts really from the grassroots level. So what you're saying is, you know, how does that happen? I think it happens from when your mindset and paying people well. Like we've touched on that. Give them.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
You know, look after them. Look after their basic needs. They will look after you. You know, I remember, this is a very small little anecdote. There was a lady who came in to meet us in our Bangalore office. We were just opening our office there. And she said, look, she was straight out of college. And she, first job, I think. And she was nervous as hell. And so I asked her, we told her about the job and this and that. So I said, how much are you expecting to earn? And she said, look, she wasn't sure. So she said, look, 10,000. Now, and for us, we had kind of put a certain kind of salary numbers in place, and that job was worth about, I don't know, 12 or 15, right? So now here was a girl who'd come in, she was expecting 10. She had no idea that we'd set a benchmark at 12 or 15,000, right? And most employers would say, listen, 10 is a little rich, let's knock it back a little bit. We'll get you down to about 9 or 8 or something, and then we'll see how you're going for 6 months, and then we'll up it. So I didn't do that. I said to her, look, tell you what, I don't like 10. We'll make it 12. And, you know, she nearly fell off her chair because nobody had ever said this to her, and her anticipation of what her own self-worth was what the number she quoted. So when she was told that, look, actually, we think you're worth a little bit more than that, then she was completely gobsmacked. So she said, look, wow, I wasn't expecting this. And now today she's running a massive big corporation out of Singapore and doing incredibly well. She, got thousands of people, looks after all of Japan, Southeast Asia, Singapore market, all of those things, right? And she started from 10,000 a month. When she was expecting 10, she got 12. So now, when you can give people that level of self-respect and freedom, and you say, look, you don't get fired for taking a wrong decision. You'll make mistakes, it's okay, we're there, we'll cover you. But obviously, don't keep making those mistakes, but, but at the same time, you get fired if you don't take a decision.
Great. So one question which has come from many people have asked me this morning. Should we ask Mr. Peter how to ensure last mile execution? There is a strategy, there is a vision. That vision and strategy has been shared, but how to ensure this to the last mile that it get executed? Any success mantra on that, Peter?
Well, first of all, I'm a great believer in having lots of sort of sales conferences, right? 1, 2, lots of celebrate success at every opportunity. Every opportunity, you got to celebrate a success. And, the old school things, right? You have a kind of barometer in your office. You have a bell in your office, a great big bell. And every time somebody closes a big deal, you go ring that bell, right? Everybody stops and sees what's going on. Why is that bell ringing? Who has done what? So they get, they simple things like that. I think that, and the confidence that if you don't make it, you're not going to get thrown out. You have to put in the effort, right? And again, they're very, very simple, basic human aspects, which we tend to ignore. We tend to kind of ignore them because we've all got MBAs under our belts, right? And we think, well, these smaller things don't matter, right? It's called key performance indicators, right? So now, what is that? What is your key performance indicator as a human being, right? You come to work, you're supposed to you've got a certain task ahead of you, and you've got to fulfill it. Now, there was a time, I'll tell you, there were 3 of our numbers were not coming to what we were expecting. So I had to kind of get down and talk to some of the sales guys and, have a chat. And I called them in one by one, and I said, look, can I just see your diary? Those days we had paper diaries, right? Today we do it differently. Yeah. So I said, look, can I have a look at your diary? So he went off and got his diary. I said, okay, so your numbers are kind of, you're 30% behind what your numbers should be. How is it? What's going on? He said, I don't know, I'm meeting people, etc. So I said, all right, let me have a look at your diary. You make a note of all the people you're going to meet every week. How many people do you meet? So he said, I don't know, about 5 or 6. He said, how's that? I said, there's 5 days in the week. I would expect you to have a breakfast meeting with someone. I expect you to have 2 meetings after breakfast, between breakfast and lunch, right? You have a lunch meeting as well with somebody. You don't sit and have lunch by yourself, right? Then you have another 2 meetings after that. And maybe you go out for a drink with somebody in the evening. So you've total, in a day, you've got about 7 meetings, right? And I say, okay, so you allow half a day for your paperwork and filling in your expenses, right? So you've got 4.5 days. So that, in my simple mathematics, comes to somewhere in the range of about 30, 35 meetings in the week. And you're talking about 5, right? So I said, let me look at your diary. Let me see how many meetings you've had last week. So I went through his diary, told him to look back the week before and see how many meetings he's had, right? He had 3, which were noted in his diary. He said, oh, I didn't note them. I said, well, if you haven't noted them, then,
it wasn't a meeting.
It wasn't a meeting, right? I said, I look at your expenses. I don't see you having had breakfast with anyone. I don't see you having taken anybody out for lunch. I don't see you having taken anybody out for an evening drink or a dinner, right? Have I ever stopped you from doing that? Right? So if I haven't stopped you, then why haven't you done it? Isn't that what you're supposed to do? Because if you're sitting with the buyer having a drink in the evening, then you can be sure that your competitor is not. Right?
Correct.
If you're having lunch with somebody, then your competitor is not having lunch.
Yeah.
So you've got to occupy that guy's mind space. So having done that, this guy was most, taken aback. He said, "Wow, I never thought of it like that." I said, "I'll tell you what, why don't you do one thing? Take your stuff and go home. 11 o'clock in the morning, right?" I said, "You go home. And then call me in the afternoon about 3 o'clock and tell me whether you want to come back to work tomorrow. If you don't want to come back, that's fine. We'll shake hands, we'll still be friends, but go get yourself a job in a bank or something." Right? And he went home, and there was second guy, third guy. All three of them, I asked them to do the same thing. You know what they did? They met downstairs in the office, outside the office. They went out and had lunch together. Then each of them called me at 3 o'clock and said, "We want to come back." Right? And today, one of them is running a huge part of Star. A couple of them are doing other big things and they, whenever we meet, they remind me of that. They say, "We'll never forget that day when you asked us to go home." One fellow went home and his dad asked him, "Why have you come home?" Right? So what I'm saying, Harish, is these are not things that you would necessarily pick up in an MBA class. These are things which are basic human values that you have to kind of follow a simple formula.
Correct.
So I'll tell you one little story I'll share with you.
Sure.
Right? There was one of my lecturers at a business school forum was outlining an experience that he had. So I'm just going to share that with you. He said that he was driving a 7-year-old BMW car, and he wanted, his family had been nagging him to say, "Dad, it's time to change this car now, and it's getting old, and we need to get a new car or whatever." This is in the US. So he, after a lot of pushing and shoving, he was driving home one evening after work, and he was heading home, and he saw the BMW showroom was open. The lights were on. It was about 5:30 in the evening. They shut at 6. So he said, "I'll quickly go in and have a chat." So he went in there, and the sales guy was just leaving. Right? So he was turning all the lights off, and he was about to go out of the door. And he walked in, and he said, and the salesperson said, "Sir, I'm sorry, sir, we're just about to close. Would you mind coming back tomorrow? If you don't mind, So he said, no problem. We're closing. It's fine." So they both walked out together, and he got in his car and left. Further down the road, there was a Lexus showroom. The lights were on. So he drove into the Lexus yard, and he went into the Lexus showroom, and there was one guy sitting there doing some paperwork. It was after closing time. So he walked in and he said, "Look, I'm sorry I've come, but I think you might be closed." He said, "No, sir, how can I help?" He said, "Well, this is what it is. My family is kind of getting on my nerves to change my car, and I'm not sure. He said, "What car do you have, sir?" He said, "I have a BMW. It's 7 years old. It's not so great. It's there. It is parked outside." So he said, "What car are you thinking of?" So he said, "I'm thinking of another similar kind of 4x4 car." So this guy said, "Sir, I actually drive a Lexus, whatever car it is. Why don't I do one thing? Why don't you take my car and go home for the weekend, and I'll take yours instead?" So he said, "Are you sure?" He said, yeah, no problem. Take it for the weekend, bring it back Monday morning, and we'll have a chat." Right? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear.
I think I lost your video.
No, not
Coming,
all
sir.
the videos. We can
Okay.
see.
Yeah, I got it. So he took out his stuff from his car. He took out and they swapped their thing. He got in the Lexus and drove home. So when he drives home, his kids are looking out the window. "Oh, Dad's arrived. Mom, he's got a new car." So he comes. They all come running out. Say, "Dad, you got a new car? Well, wonderful." He said, "No, it's not a new car. It's just something I got." So he explained. They said, "No, come on, let's go for a drive." So he took him out for an ice cream and everything. Went out. They all had a thing. Sunday came. They had similar kind of thing. They went out for a little drive. They loved the car, right? Monday morning, he goes to return the car, and The guy at the showroom says, so what do you think? He said, look, it's wonderful, thank you, but I wanted to buy a BMW. He said, look, you can go to the BMW guys, no problem. But if you want this, we can get you one sorted out in no time. And what did he do? He bought the Lexus.
Obviously.
He started out thinking he wanted the BMW. He drives a BMW currently. His family wanted him to buy a new one, but he bought a Lexus. Why? Because the sales guy took the initiative at that point and said to him, look, don't worry, you take mine, go test drive it, keep it for the weekend. Didn't cost him anything, right? No extra effort on the salesperson's point of perspective. He kind of he was doing his job. Now, the BMW guy did everything by the book. Showroom closes at 6. Sorry, sir, come back tomorrow. So now, what's the lesson in that? So,
customers don't wait for you. You have to wait for them.
And, you have to get that customer, right?
Yeah.
So the same thing happens in our day-to-day sales offices every day.
Yeah.
Now, when that happens, I promise you that makes all the difference.
Correct.
I'm sorry, it's such a simple example, but it really is so true.
Correct. So, coming back on the same sales, since you're talking of sales, so one question always keeps coming is money the only motivator for the sales team, or there is more to it? At a leadership level, should we treat, if I don't have an empowerment of spending enough money for whatever constraints we all are going through right now, maybe last 15 months or maybe earlier also, is money the only motivator, or there are more to it?
See, I don't think money is the only motivator, not by a long way. I think recognition is. Therefore, I said, earlier, celebrate every success. And celebration doesn't necessarily mean you have to spend a lot of money. It's how you recognize somebody's achievements. If I had to give you a 5-year award, and I'm giving you a watch, and I'm passing you in the corridor, and I say, hey, Harish, I've got this watch for you. Here's a 5-year award for your watch. Thanks very much. And I give it to you, hand it to you, and you look at it and you say, oh, nice watch, and you carry on. Right? Or if I get everybody together and say, hey, you got a small little announcement, 2 minutes, stop everyone, just put everything down, 5 minutes, we're going to talk to you about this. Harish, can you just come up? Quick one. Here's a little award for you. Thank you so much. Wonderful things you've been doing. Here it is. Here's a 5-year award for you. In front of everyone, right? Still the same thing you're giving him.
But the value changes. Value is manifold.
Totally. So now money is not the motivator here.
It's the gesture. It's the way you treat.
It's the gesture. It's the recognition that you've given that individual.
And going on from this, the next very important question that many of my leaders have asked me, do you think, because you talked a lot about in this book also, so I'm asking you specifically so that you can answer this.
Sure.
What is the importance of a good mentor in a professional life?
I cannot tell you how important. I cannot tell you how important it is. And I wish I had a good mentor, or a mentor, not good mentor. I had a mentor through my early years in my career. I did not. I never knew of the concept. I didn't know of the concept so much, and I didn't really give it too much time or thought. But I'll tell you something. I think in the last 5 or 6 years, I was asked to mentor 2 people. One was a young lad out of somewhere in Bengal, who was a very bright chap, came out of IIT, very bright technically, but had no idea how to run a business. And then there was another lady who was in the Czech Republic, based in Prague, and she was the COO of a media company. And she had a boss who was the CEO, who was about to retire, and then the owner of the company, right? And the CEO would never give her any real value. He would not give her any. He would hold every bit of information to himself. He would kind of communicate with the owner and pass very little down to her, right? So she had all kinds of issues. She wanted to leave. She wanted, then And that role of mentoring is very important, because you are not just a mentor from a career point of view. You're a mentor from an individual. So whatever that individual happens to be facing, could be personal, could be professional, it is all encompassing. Now, this lady's mother was suffering from cancer. She was sharing with me. I used to do 2 calls a month with her, right, on Skype. And we would talk for an hour, scheduled for an hour. Sometimes we would go 1.5 hours, sometimes it would be, a couple of hours, but generally between an hour and an hour. And we would talk about everything, talk about her work, talk about how she's doing, what her kind of issues are, what's bothering her, what, her boss is doing, how's he kind of handling her issues, etc., etc., etc. So I cannot tell you how important I think that is. And she said to me, look, and don't forget, we were miles away. I was in London at the time. She was in Prague, right? Then I moved from London to Bombay and we carried on. So I was in Bombay then, a different time zone completely, right? And we would schedule our meetings 2 weeks on. And then if there was any change, we'd get in touch beforehand and say, look, can't do 3 o'clock, we'll do 5. Is that okay? Whatever. And it made so much difference to her that she kind of kept telling me that, look, I find this really valuable. Right? And initially, I had never done this before, but somebody had put me onto it. An HR person, actually, had put me onto it and said, listen, you got to help this person. She's very keen to do this. And, will you do it? And I said, look, I'm happy to do it, but I don't think I can charge anything. She said, no, you must charge something. I had no idea how much to charge. Anyway, we worked out something. And we just stuck with that. She said, look, if you don't charge, then they don't see much value in it, or as much value. So I would say mentoring is a must at whatever level, because people cannot talk about their issues with friends. Excuse me. You cannot talk to family sometimes. You certainly cannot talk to colleagues. You cannot talk to your boss. Right? And there are certain things you can't even talk to your life partner. So who do you talk to? So what happens very often is that people get frustrated and they resign their jobs. So I can't do this. I don't know what's going on. This one doesn't like me. This one hates me. This one, na. And so I'm going to resign. So they resign and look for another job. And I think that's a big mistake. And I think that's a big fallacy. So if people are able to kind of have a conversation with somebody offline and talk and get some insights, then the chances are they'll be able to set the course right for themselves and not leave the job. And then that's good for the organization. It's good for the individual.
That's very nice. One question which has come up is that, did you face any very, very difficult challenge in your tenure to when you were establishing Star? And if yes, then how did you really tackle it? I mean, challenge in your leadership. I mean, as such, not exactly government challenges. Huh? What is the leadership challenges you must have, the most difficult leadership challenge, and how you must have tackled it?
I had, despite all those things that I've just said to you about recognition, motivation, incentivizing people, etc. It was always very hard to have your next level of team, if you like, to work as one cohesive unit. It was always hard. And there were always, because, if several people are at a similar level, let's say they're all number 2 level, they all know that someday they have an opportunity to get promoted. And if that happens, or when that happens, their nearest competitor is their colleague, who is another number 2 in another part of the business, right? So in a sense, they're always a little kind of overwhelmed by that thought. So they are not as trusting and they're not as open. And they are competitive. And there's a little bit of political game playing that goes on, right? Somebody's trying to win over somebody else. Somebody's trying to screw over somebody else. that's fact in life. I mean, that happens from the day we go to school, right? So as a chief executive or as a leader of a bunch of people, that is something that you face on a regular basis. So and people will come and tell you things about other people with an agenda, right? So they kind of put things in your head, and then you get kind of messed up in your own head about things because you wonder what's going on. So you have to be I think from a leadership point of view, that certainly was one of my sort of pressing issues on a regular basis. So I would have to deal with that. And particularly when you're expanding a business and you're looking at, bringing in a new team, setting up a new structure for a new company that you may have acquired or merged with or something, then who do you put there? Do you bring somebody else from the outside, or do you promote from within? And that was something that I always believed in, trying to promote from within. And if you can do that, that's fine. But very often you've got to satisfy some of the other people who are alongside that person. But if you bring somebody in from the outside, then you're going to rub a lot of people up the wrong way. Mm-hmm. And they get upset, saying, listen, I've been here 10 years, and I thought I'd get this opportunity, but you've gone and hired somebody from outside who I don't think is up to much anyway. I could do a better job. And so, why am I here? Why am I still here? Right? So they get upset. They want to leave. They're not unhappy. So how do you manage that? And I think that's a really tough challenge to kind of have to face. What is the answer to that? I'm sure you'll ask me, right? I'm not 100% sure. I think you have to be close to as many of those people as you can and be as honest with them rather than being cute, right? So you be honest with them to say, look, this is what it is. This is my concern. This is why I don't think you can do this, why I don't want you to do it, because I have something bigger in mind for you, 2 months down the line, right? So I think you have to be completely honest in your
honest and transparent from them.
Yeah, because then these are people that you've spent a lot of time with, and you will continue to be friends with them even after they
leave.
You
move on,
right? And I think that becomes very important. So you have to have that in your.
So Peter, in your tenure as a CEO, you must have encountered some situations where you would have realized that the data shows that this decision is right, but your gutsy instinct tells you there is something which keeps talking to you as a human being, and that tells you this is not right. Data says this is right, but your instinct says this is not right. In that situation, what you would have followed?
Your instinct.
Sorry?
Your instinct, without doubt.
Instinct.
You have to go with your instinct, because at the end of the day, that's what you have to do. You have to look yourself in the mirror and every morning and deal with it, right? As one of my teachers had said, listen, if you have a spot on your nose and you shave, you have to kind of deal with it. It's not something that you can avoid. So I think, without doubt, I think your question is well put, in the sense that it's how do you handle that? It's not an easy one.
I understand.
But you have to go with instinct, because there are enough people who are, believers in following data. And I think the larger the organization becomes,
the more it becomes,
the larger that group becomes, because that is the way, MBAs are trained.
Yeah.
They follow data tracks, and that's fine. And it very often that might, they may well be right, but at the end of the day, when you have to take a decision and you are accountable, then you have to be able to kind of look yourself and put your hand on your heart and say, look, I understand what the data is saying, but I'll tell you what, I'm not going to go with it. I'm going to go with this.
Thank you,
and
Peter.
you try and convince
Correct.
your kind of people who are countering it with your logic. It doesn't always work though.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for your time. Before we move on further, I just somehow, because I got late myself, I think I did introduce you to my team. So let me introduce you to them also. We have Mr. Varish Tiwari, who heads our Rajasthan states. He is our CEO for Rajasthan. Varish, say hi.
We
Yes, sir.
met.
Yeah, I was the first
And
person.
Yes.
yeah,
Nice to meet
and
you.
we have Mr. Sumit Modi, who handles MP. He's
Yeah.
MP state. And then we have Mr. Sanjeev Chauhan from Gujarat.
Hi, Peter.
He handles
Hi,
entire
Dave.
Gujarat state.
Hi, nice
We
to
have,
meet you.
yeah, and we have Mr. Devesh Kumar Singh. He handles Chhattisgarh. We have
Awesome.
Saren Chatterjee. He handles Bihar and Jharkhand.
Hello,
And we
sir.
have
Good
Nishit
evening.
Jain, who handles Maharashtra, Bihar, and Jharkhand. So these are my 7 CEOs who handle 7 different states. And they are my, I would say, right hand, left hand, all eyes, ears, everything is, I depend totally on them.
Of course.
Kakun, you already know. And then there are other team members in the here, they're already there. So I have asked a lot of questions, guys. I want each one of you to ask one question from your side so that बोल के थक गया हूँ थोड़ा Peter is also tired, but if you have some more questions, please ask. Varish, you have any question to ask, please?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, as far as leadership traits are concerned, so there may be a different leadership traits for to handle the upper level, lower level, peer from the same function, peer from the cross function, or outsiders.
I don't think so. I think you've got to handle everybody as as you would expect to be handled yourself. Okay, so no matter what you do, you would like to be handled a certain way by your managers, and I think you've got to do the same, whether it's your driver or whether it's your VP or whoever. And this is it in our work culture in India. I'm sorry to say that does not happen, and it's very difficult to put that into practice sometimes. But you have to. That should be your mission, and if you can get close to achieving that, then I think you will have done well for yourself and for the people that work for you. So try and avoid see, look, organizations have hierarchy. You can't help that. But in your dealings with them, you have to do it as egalitarian a way as you can.
So what I get from you, Peter, is I've been following this practice a lot from myself also. I think what you're trying to say is that treat everybody equal, treat with respect, treat with transparency, be honest with them. Even if you have to say no, tell very honestly why you can't do this.
Yeah.
So I think hierarchy doesn't matter. What matters is how you deal with the human beings.
Totally.
Whether they are dealing with you in whatever way doesn't matter. Depends as a leader, how are you dealing with them? That's more important, because at the end of the day, it's your concise, which has to be very clear. That how I've dealt with the people I met today, and junior, senior, or promoter, or whatever it is.
And also, Harish, just to add to that, I would say that be aware of their situations as much as you can. It is hard, but that's where your investment of time pays off.
Correct.
Right? I mean, understand that they have, he's got a family, he's got a missus, he's got young kids, maybe his one kid is, not well, whatever it is, try and get that feedback from somebody about that person, so that, when you're meeting, you ask them, hey, how's your kid doing? I heard he was not well, he had surgery, is he all right now? And I think those things suddenly become hugely meaningful. They go back home and they say, the boss asked me about my kid. Yeah, I went to ask him about some problem, and he asked me about my kid. How wonderful is that? And I
Definitely.
think you've got to have that level of personal chemistry, which you have to kind of use to your advantage.
Sumit, you have some question? Your speaker is off, Sumit.
Hi, Peter.
I
Yeah. Star has been known for some iconic shows like KBC.
Yeah.
So I just want to know what kind of the thought process you means the Star TV or the leadership team gone through during that time to launch such kind of a shows, because a lot of their TRP, everything is depending on the shows.
Yeah.
So for such kind of ideation, I want to understand what the process or the thought which on which you work on that to develop such kind of a iconic shows.
Well, let me tell you, I must confess that, and I'm happy to say this, that, my understanding of content and shows that some, over a period of time became iconic, if you like, was very limited. Okay. I'm not a content person. My background has been in advertising. My background has been in marketing. My background has been in, areas other than programming. So, and I recognize that to be a weakness. And therefore, I relied very, very heavily on my team people who were, experts in that programming space. So people like Samir Nair, I would say Deepak Sehgal, Tarun Katyal, names that you may or may not have heard of, are people that I relied on extensively to, handle the content aspect of the business. So when it came to, for example, buying movies, Hindi movies, right? I was not, very familiar with, which movie to buy or which movie to kind of, and how much to pay for it, etc. And without trying to be an expert in something that I knew nothing about, it was going to be very difficult, and people would see through that in no time. So rather than trying to pretend, I would always meet the people concerned. I would say hi and do all of that, do the kind of social thing, but put them onto the programming guys and let them deal with, and they had their own understanding and they had their ability to be able to decide yes or no, and what they had a budget to work with. They had to be within that budget. But I never said to them that, look, I think you should buy this show, or I think you should not buy this show, or buy that movie, or whatever. Now, when it came to something like a KBC, I was, again, sort of in a way dragged into a negotiating kind of situation with Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, who was the host of the show, and I was the CEO of Star. So I was, expected to kind of meet with him and agree the terms of his engagement, all of those things. But again, for me, yeah, he was a big star. I saw him when I was growing up as a kid. And so, he was always somebody that I was in awe of. But, I didn't know how to kind of necessarily whether he was the right guy or not. But if I was being guided by, let's say Samir at that time to say, look, I think Amitabh would be absolutely the best host for us, then I would say, okay, look, there's a theory in this thing that if you have a dog, you don't bark yourself, right?
Yeah.
So, if you've got somebody to do a particular job, then let them do it. Why will I be the content head as well?
This was a very nice example. So 3 more questions and we close then. So Sanjeev, you have some question?
Yes,
Yeah,
hi,
please.
Peter. Thank you for giving your precious time. Wonderfully written book. It
Thank
was
you
like
so
a movie. Honestly speaking, the language was so simple. It was like a movie which I was actually going through. I
I
thought,
love it. Thank you so much, Ajay. Thank you.
so I just quickly want to ask you one small question. It is related to the current scenario where we are calling it as a new normal, and we are seeing every industry is passing through some of these other change. And
Yeah.
same with us also. In print industry, what we are seeing is everything's getting challenged of last 30 years, 40 years. Even I'm seeing Times of India also getting challenged with a lot of difficulties. So in
Sure.
this scenario, when you have a team of 10 years, 12 years vintage, how one can lead through this change actually? I mean, from your perspective, how you feel one should be, as a leader, should pass through this change when you have so much of changes going on?
Wow. That's a really, really very good question, actually. I mean, I don't know whether there is from my point of view, I've often thought about it, that if I was in a situation where I was in a workplace currently and I was having to deal with this, how would I handle it? I think, first of all, I think you have to be very compassionate about people's, the issues that they're facing, whether it's to do with their families and their, potential illnesses, the kids not going to school, some of their, maybe their partners are not, as happily employed where they are. Maybe they've got other things going on in their thing. They've got bills to pay, they've got rents to pay, they've got, other expenses which they have to meet. And they are in a difficult place mentally and, emotionally. So as a leader of people, how do you kind of handle that? And I think that's, you have to do it on a one-to-one. I don't think you can have a general thumb rule, number one. And I think also you have to be very compassionate. You have to be, full of gratitude, towards the people that work for you, towards the, organization that you work for, that they have, held on to you and they've kind of continued to, keep you employed and everything during these, really tough times. But I think above all, you have to be flexible. So when I say flexible, I mean really that your flexibility has to be individual driven. I don't think you can have a kind of blanket rule for everyone. So somebody might say, listen, you can work from home. Right now, working from home is a big thing right now. Everybody is saying, listen, I'll work from home. And, your requirements are different. Your discipline requirements are different. Your timing requirements. Maybe they don't have a home where they can work from. Maybe they, in the sense that, there's too many people there. They don't have the space. There's too much noise. There's 5-7 members of the family all doing something. How are they going to get space to be able to handle work? Right? So you have to find a way to be able to overcome that. Working from home is a nice concept. It's a very Western concept, right? When you bring it into India where, we have joint families, where we have, multiple people living in a very small space, how do people work from home? Right? So I think you have to be flexible to that extent. I don't know if as I say, there isn't an easy answer to this, but there is it's a big challenge.
Well, thank you, Peter. I think that is what we are currently trying to do also. And this is the best way probably we can make our team together and make this company successful also. Yeah.
But I'll tell you something on this subject. I think it's a very important point. I think it is the new normal, though.
Correct.
I mean, I don't think it's going to be, I don't think we're going to go back to to an environment where like we were 3 years ago.
Correct. So you have to adapt to a new scenario only. That is what probably we are also living. I mean, that is what...
Absolutely. I think not only adapt, I think you have to recreate.
Correct.
I think you have to really think hard and think about how you would structure your work environment in a new kind of set of circumstances. Right. Adapting is one thing. I agree with you, but adapting means using the same set of
so
tools that
you reinventing yourself with a scenario. That is what probably
totally reinvent. So it's from A to Z. You have to reinvent. How do your finance teams work? everything is happening online. I mean, do you meet in a restaurant to kind of have a meeting? Do you meet in cars? Do you meet in where do you meet to get everybody together and have a discussion?
Sure.
So I think you have to reinvent to the point where it's more than readapting, Sanjeev.
Correct. That's perfect. Thank you.
So
Peter.
one last question, guys. Okay, two last question. Okay. So we start with Nishit ji and then we come to Devesh. Yeah, Nishit.
Peter, my question is, as a leader, you were instrumental in building up an organization called Star India.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it was the brand Star, the channel, which was built up. So I was just want to understand how different the two jobs were.
Well, I think the building the organization was more important. The brand kind of built itself in a way because the content spoke for the content that actually made the brand. And because people were watching our programs, we were able to get into their homes every day on their television screens. And our objective at that point was, look, let's not do anything which is, similar to brain surgery, right? Let's do something simple, keep it simple, right? I mean, I just love simplicity to the extent that keep it simple. All you want to do really is to give Mr. and Mrs. Khanna, Mr. and Mrs. Shah, Mr. and Mrs. Banerjee, whoever around the country, a feeling of being warm and fuzzy when they're watching television. They should feel, if they've spent half an hour watching your program, that they've enjoyed it, right? You've not taken them for granted. You've not kind of, your sound has not gone funny. Your, commercial breaks are not too long. You have not kind of destroyed the viewing experience. Give them a nice feeling at the end of that half an hour, right? And they watch it and they finish and they say to each other, maja aaya. Right? Now, if you do that consistently, then you build your brand. And that's the Star brand that goes on air every night, day in, day out for years, right? And it's easy to screw that up. Very easy. I mean, it takes, 1 or 2 days and 1 or 2 kind of loose connections to make that whole thing fall apart. Mm-hmm. Then on the flip side, the Star India brand, right? That is harder. Because now you've got a team of people that you want to bring into your company and work for you and have the same mindset that you have. Right? And they have to go home and they have to meet their families and their neighbors and their relatives. And they all want to know, where are you working? And they say, I'm working for Star India. And the first thing they get told is that, hey, I will watch that show. It was such a bakwas show, or it was such a good show, right? And they have to deal with that. And very often we had people who would come to us for a job. They want to work for us, but because they were young, their parents said, no, Baba, don't go and work for Star, right? So I had people who came to me and said, please, will you speak to my mom or speak to my dad and tell them that, it's a place that they will feel comfortable that their son or daughter is working there. Because mom and dad would be very happy if they joined Hindustan Lever, or if they joined even Sony, or if they joined Z, right? But if you say they're going to go and join Star, they'd say, hey, I don't know, it's a funny kind of company, not sure. So they were not sure, but the potential employee was very confident. But I had to so often speak to somebody's parents to say, look, are you, please feel reassured that, they'll be well looked after, it'll be good for their career, etc., etc. So the two separate entities, as you said, one is the Star brand. So that brand happens day in, day out, night after night. The Star India company brand is something else. And that's where you make, your, at that time, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 employees feel very welcome, very treasured, very valued, and that they, we respect them and we want them there. So they should never feel that, they're dispensable.
Yeah, Devesh, your point. Last question.
Peter, sir, Star being the costliest channel for advertising, how you competed with other local channels who were selling at throwaway price? Being a sales guy, we always fight with others newspaper कि they are selling in throwaway price. हमको भी इतना दे दो, हमको भी इतना कर दो.
Yeah,
that time.
I love this question because it's something that, very close to my heart. And I used to get this every day. And I think the two ways to deal with it, I've always believed, is one is please hire the right people for the job, because they have to be able to kind of, as they say, they have to be able to talk the hind legs off a donkey, right? They have to be able to kind of, be able to sell. Most salespeople like to call themselves marketing people, right? You ask them, what do they do? They say, I do marketing. They're shy of saying they're salespeople, right? They have to be proud to say that they're salespeople. So when they go to a buyer and the buyer says, yeah, this fellow is giving it for this much price, this much price. Look, somebody is always going to be able to do it cheaper. And, you have to kind of invest time in training them, in giving them good counseling, good guidance, good back-end support to make sure that they are able to kind of convince the buyer that what they're buying is actually worth it. It's the reason I'm saying it's a really good question is because it's a question that I get asked regularly, right? Particularly in this current environment. People ask me this question, what is the future of TV broadcasting, right? There's no revenue left for TV broadcast, right? All the online services are gobbling up all the money, right? So how are we going to survive? Point is, they don't hire the right people, they don't train those people, and they go and they send them out to do some selling. How will that person sell? They've not been trained, they've not been given the proper kind of, backing to go and do this. Now but that is where the challenge lies for managers, right? Managers like yourself have to be really sure that the guy who's going to sell, how does a Toyota sell versus a Suzuki? No different, right? They're both Japanese. They're both similar kind of vehicles. They're within 5, 7, 8, 10, 1,000 rupees of the value of a car. But yet, somebody says, listen, I want to buy a Suzuki. I will not go to Toyota. I will not go to Toyota and not go to Suzuki. Now, the little example I gave to Harish, and you probably heard it, was this BMW and Lexus thing. So, how did that guy sell the Lexus when this chap had already made up his mind he was going to buy a BMW? Because he gave him that sense of comfort. He said, look, take this thing, enjoy it over the weekend, come back. Now, everybody doesn't have to sell a car, but if you're selling something else, you give them a sense of, that they're worth what they're doing. It's easy, to try and compete with somebody on price. But it's you're making a rod for your own back. Because tomorrow that will come back to bite you.
And there is no end of decreasing the price, no, sir?
Yeah, no end. And then you'll be known in the market for somebody who drops their price.
Very true.
And then you finish. Then the game is over. Then in a matter of time, when everybody is going to say, hey, they don't have a price barrier.
So that's
Thank you, sir.
end. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And Devesh, answering your question on what Peter is trying to say is this. When somebody asks me that he is giving so much cheap, I ask him, why don't you ask him what's wrong with him? Why is he selling cheaper than me? He doesn't know my price. Why is he selling? If we are the same, if you think we are the same, then why is he discounting? I'm not discounting. He's discounting, but you're saying, right? So sometimes you have to ask different questions. And what Peter is saying is train your team well on your advantages, on your product, on your differentiation of product, how you deliver a product, what goes into making a different product, how much pain, efforts your organization is making in creating that kind of product, so that they understand why you are little expensive than what. And there can never be any comparison between two of the products, as Peter said. Even if you are using everything same, depends over a period of time. What has been your brand experience? What has been your sales team experience? What experience they create at the customer's end finally? How they deal with them, how they approach them. So a lot goes in how you deal with them. So good question, very nice question. Yeah,
Very good.
you saying something? Yeah.
Yeah, Harish, I was just going to say, I think, I'm sure you are already, but you should be recognized in the marketplace for having the best salespeople in the country.
Correct.
Best salespeople. They are efficient, they're punctual, they're polite, they are kind of well groomed, all of those things. So that all comes in the hiring process and your training. And the training, invest in that, because then that will pay you returns.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Peter, for your time. And before we end this show, I want to put a line to all of you. I'm sure all of you know it. We had Sanjay Gupta. We started with Sanjay Gupta of Google. We bought Raj Nayak. Then we got Samin Nair. Then we have Monica Tata at Disney. She's the MD. All of them have been trained by Peter. They all were part of Peter's team. And see so many good CEOs he has given to the industry. Raj Nayak was heading Colors, Samin Nair head for Star, now he's heading Applause. Monica is heading Disney. If you see all of them, they're doing very good in their life. And this is what a good leader is all about. It's about impacting their life, not in the short term, but also in the long term. So thank you very much, Peter, for your time. I'm sure you must be tired. It's almost more than 90 minutes you have been speaking. And thank you for your valuable inputs. Thank you for your experience. Your book is really nice. And I'm a book lover. So it's so easy to read and so simple a language that many times I read books, sometimes you refer to dictionaries sometimes, being Indians. So when this book, it was like this, I was like feeling it is in my language. It's so easy to read. So thanks a lot for your time. Thanks a lot.
Before we end, I just wanted to say something to Peter. Peter, I read something about your book which resonated with me a lot. That there's this whole new world, the mobile first world that has come about. But where is the Mukerjea to lead it?
So it's very, very sweet of you to point that out. Thank you so much, Gakun.
Yeah, you're most welcome. And thank you so much for your time. And
my pleasure. And thank you, Harish. Thank you. Thank you so much
for organizing this.
Thank you.
For, patiently listening to me. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.